When Sarah Martinez found documents proving her CEO had stolen millions from dying children, she knew he would destroy her life, just like he'd secretly arranged her husband's accident 5 years ago. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Sarah Martinez's mop glided across the polished marble floor of Thomson Global Enterprises. At 3 a.m., the towering Manhattan skyscraper belonged to the invisible ones, the cleaners, security guards, and maintenance staff who kept the corporate machine running while executives slept in their penthouses. Sarah paused near the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 45th floor, catching her reflection in the glass. At 45, her dark hair was streaked with silver, and fine lines had begun to form around her eyes. Badges of honor from raising 2 teenagers alone since Carlos's death 5 years ago. The city lights twinkled below, a glittering carpet of possibilities that always seemed just out of reach. The gentle swoosh of her mop provided a rhythm to her thoughts as she worked her way toward the executive suites. 12 years of cleaning these offices had taught her to be invisible while keeping her eyes open and her mouth shut. The higher-ups barely acknowledged her existence, which suited her just fine. It meant they spoke freely in her presence, treating her like part of the furniture. Did you see the numbers from the Children's Cancer Initiative? Sarah's ears perked up at the mention of the company's flagship charity project. The voice belonged to Linda Chun, one of the senior accountants who often worked late. Through the glass partition, Sarah could see her hunched over a computer, talking on the phone. Something's not adding up, Marcus. The reported donations don't match the actual disbursements. Linda's voice was tense. I've triple-checked everything. There's money missing, significant amounts. Sarah slowed her mopping, careful to maintain the same rhythm while straining to hear more. Linda lowered her voice, but fragments still reached Sarah's ears. Millions unaccounted for. CEO's private accounts. Can't prove anything. The conversation ended abruptly as footsteps echoed down the marble hallway. James Thompson, CEO of Thomson Global, emerged from his corner office, his custom Italian shoes clicking against the floor Sarah had just cleaned. He was a tall man with steel gray hair and cold blue eyes that never quite matched his practiced smile. Linda, burning the midnight oil again? His voice carried that particular tone of forced joviality that Sarah had learned to distrust. Don't work too hard. Sometimes it's better not to dig too deep into the numbers. They can be misleading. The threat beneath the casual words was unmistakable. Linda's face paled as she nodded, gathering her things quickly. Sarah kept her head down, pushing her mop with practiced efficiency as Linda hurried past, the click of her heels fading into the distance. Thompson's gaze swept over Sarah without seeing her, just another shadow in his kingdom of glass and steel. As he turned back toward his office, Sarah noticed something unusual. His secretary's desk drawer was slightly ajar, a manila folder peeking out where it hadn't been earlier. The CEO disappeared into his office, phone already pressed to his ear. Sarah continued her work, circling closer to the secretary's desk. Years of avoiding notice had taught her to move silently, to blend into the background like a ghost. The folder caught her eye again. Through the slight gap in the drawer, she could make out part of the label, CCI Fund Transfers, Private. Her heart began to race as Linda's words echoed in her mind. The Children's Cancer Initiative, her son, Miguel, had benefited from their support program during his treatment 2 years ago. Sarah glanced at Thompson's office. He was facing the windows, engaged in what seemed to be a heated conversation, making a decision that would change her life forever. She quickly slid the drawer open wider and snapped a photo of the top document with her phone. Later that morning, sitting at her small kitchen table in her warm but tidy Bronx apartment, Sarah's hands trembled as she examined the photo. The numbers were clear enough. Millions of dollars meant for sick children had been systematically diverted to offshore accounts. The sound of her children stirring in their shared bedroom brought her back to reality. Miguel, now 15 and cancer-free, would need his medication before school. Isabella, 17 and already dreaming of college, would want help with her scholarship applications. Sarah thought of all the other families like hers, struggling to pay for treatments while Thompson lived in luxury. The evidence was in her hands now. But what could a cleaning lady do against one of the most powerful men in New York? The morning sun began to creep through her kitchen window as Sarah made a decision that would set in motion events she couldn't possibly predict. She would not remain invisible any longer. For her children, for all the families counting on that charity money, she would find a way to expose the truth. What she didn't know then was that her journey would test not just her courage, but everything she believed about justice, power, and her own capacity to stand against forces that seemed insurmountable. The early morning rush at Manny's Diner provided the perfect cover for Sarah's meeting with Marcus Wright, the building's head custodian. The clatter of plates and sizzle of the grill masked their conversation as they huddled in a corner booth, steam rising from their coffee cups. Marcus had been at Thomson Global for 25 years, his weathered face and calloused hands telling the story of countless nights maintaining the building's pristine facade. Unlike most of the day staff, he treated the cleaning crew with respect, remembering birthdays and covering shifts when family emergencies arose. "You're playing with fire, Sarah," Marcus warned, his voice low as he studied the photo on her phone. Thompson didn't get where he is by playing nice. Remember what happened to Janet from accounting last year? Sarah remembered all too well. Janet had questioned some irregularities in the books and suddenly found herself facing embezzlement charges. The evidence had been perfectly fabricated, and Janet now worked at a gas station in New Jersey. "But this is different," Sarah insisted, pulling out a small notebook where she documented dates and figures. "This money was meant for kids with cancer, Marcus." "My Miguel? If it wasn't for that program." Her voice caught as she remembered the endless nights in the hospital, the way the charity had helped cover costs her insurance wouldn't touch. The diner's bell chimed as Linda Chun walked in, looking far more disheveled than her usual polished self. Sarah waved her over, noting the dark circles under the accountant's eyes and the slight tremor in her hands as she slid into the booth. "I shouldn't be here," Linda said, glancing nervously at the door. "If Thompson finds out, he won't," Marcus assured her, sliding a fresh cup of coffee her way. "Sarah's been invisible to them for 12 years. That's our advantage." Linda pulled out her own notebook, filled with columns of numbers and annotations. "The diversion scheme is clever. Small amounts from multiple programs, filtered through a maze of shell companies. But the cancer initiative took the biggest hit. Last quarter alone, $3 million vanished." Sarah thought of the children's ward she visited regularly, bringing small treats and reading stories. How many treatments could $3 million have covered? How many families had been turned away while Thompson added another floor to his Hamptons mansion? The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's phone buzzing. A text from Isabella. "Mom, Miguel's having bad dreams again. He's worried about the next scan." The message crystallized something in Sarah's mind. This wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about all the Miguels out there, all the mothers sitting up at night wondering how to pay for the next round of treatment. "Thompson has a reputation for making problems disappear," Linda continued, stirring her coffee absently. "People, documents, entire departments if necessary. He's got half the board in his pocket and friends in the DA's office. Then we need to be smarter." Sarah replied, her voice steady. "Every night, I clean their offices. I hear their conversations. They forget I'm there." And now, she patted her phone. "I have proof." Marcus leaned back, studying Sarah with newfound respect. "You've changed since Carlos passed," he observed. "Stronger, more determined." Sarah thought of her late husband, his unwavering sense of justice, his belief that one person could make a difference. Carlos always said that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing what's right anyway. The morning crowd was thinning out as they finalized their plan. Sarah would continue gathering evidence, using her invisible status to document the money trail. Linda would provide financial expertise, helping interpret the documents. Marcus would be their eyes and ears, monitoring Thompson's movements and providing cover when needed. As they prepared to leave, Linda grabbed Sarah's arm. "Why are you willing to risk everything for this? You could just walk away, protect your family." Sarah thought of Carlos, of Miguel's battles, of all the families she'd met in the hospital waiting rooms. Because sometimes the only thing worse than fighting back is living with yourself if you don't. The trio parted ways, each heading to their respective posts in the glass tower that held so many secrets. Sarah's mind was already racing, planning her next moves. She had the advantage of being underestimated, overlooked. But she also knew that one wrong move could cost her everything. That evening, as Sarah prepared dinner in her small kitchen, Isabella helped Miguel with his homework at the worn kitchen table. The sounds of their quiet conversation, punctuated by occasional laughter, reminded her of exactly what she was fighting for. "Mom," Miguel called out, "can we visit the hospital this weekend? I want to read to the kids in the ward." Sarah turned from the stove, her heart swelling with pride. Even after everything he'd been through, her son thought of others first. "Of course, Mio. We'll bring those new books you got." Later, after the children were asleep, Sarah sat at her kitchen table reviewing the evidence she'd gathered. Tomorrow would begin a dangerous game of cat and mouse with one of the most powerful men in New York. But as she looked at the family photos on her wall, Carlos's proud smile, Miguel's graduation from cancer treatment, Isabella's debate team victory, she knew she had no choice. The truth had landed in her lap like a lit match, and she could either let it burn out or use it to ignite a fire that would illuminate all the dark corners of Thompson Global. As she finally headed to bed, Sarah Martinez, the invisible cleaning lady, had already begun to transform into something Thompson and his cronies never expected: their worst nightmare. The next evening started like any other at Thompson Global, with Sarah methodically working her way through the executive floor. The difference was in the weight of her phone in her pocket, now containing evidence that could bring down an empire. She had just finished cleaning Thompson's private bathroom when voices from his office made her freeze. "The audit team is getting too close." Thompson's voice carried through the partially open door. "We need to clean house before they dig deeper. The electronic records are already being altered," responded a voice Sarah recognized as Michael Brooks, the head of IT. "But there are still hard copies in the archive room. Then get rid of them, all of them." I don't care how single quotes, Thompson's tone left no room for argument. "And start with anything related to the cancer initiative. That nosy accountant Chun has been asking too many questions." Sarah's heart pounded as she pressed herself against the wall, becoming one with the shadows she knew so well. Through the gap in the door, she could see Thompson standing at his window, Manhattan's lights creating a halo around his silhouette. "What about Chun?" Brooks asked. "I'll handle her the same way we handled Jazz." Thompson's laugh was cold. "It's amazing what people will believe when you plant the right evidence." The conversation continued, but Sarah had heard enough. She needed to warn Linda. More urgently, she needed to get to those documents before they disappeared. Her mind raced through the building's layout. The archive room was 3 floors down, in a secure area she wasn't supposed to clean. As footsteps approached the door, Sarah quickly pushed her cart toward the elevator bank, maintaining her usual unhurried pace despite her racing heart. Thompson and Brooks passed by without a glance, their conversation shifting to golf scores, as if they hadn't just discussed destroying evidence and framing an innocent woman. Once they disappeared around the corner, Sarah pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to Marcus. "Need archive room access. Emergency." Within minutes, he responded, "Security doing rounds. Clear for next 20 minutes." Keycard under mat by service elevator. This was it, the moment when everything could go wrong. Sarah had cleaned this building for 12 years without ever breaking a rule. But as she retrieved the keycard and headed for the archive room, she thought of Miguel's face during chemotherapy, of all the other children who needed help that Thompson had stolen. The archive room's lock clicked open with a sound that seemed deafening in the empty hallway. Inside, the smell of paper and dust filled her nostrils as she quickly scanned the labels on the filing cabinets. Her hands shook as she found the section marked Charitable Initiatives. Working quickly, Sarah began photographing documents, her phone's flash illuminating decades of systematic theft. The evidence was overwhelming. False reports, doctored numbers, letters from desperate families requesting help that had been denied while their allocated funds went to Thompson's private accounts. A noise in the hallway made her heart stop. Footsteps, getting closer. Sarah quickly closed the cabinet and looked for a place to hide. The footsteps paused outside the door, and she heard the beep of a keycard. In desperation, she squeezed behind a tall filing cabinet, making herself as small as possible. The door opened, and Brooks walked in, followed by two men carrying boxes. "Start with these cabinets," he ordered. "Everything needs to be gone by morning. Make it look like routine document disposal." Sarah barely breathed as they began methodically emptying filing cabinets, dumping years of records into boxes marked for shredding. From her hiding spot, she continued recording video, capturing their systematic destruction of evidence. A phone rang, making her jump. "Brooks here," the IT director answered. "Yes, sir." "Already underway." No traces." "What about Chung?" "Understanding, sir. I'll handle it personally." The conversation confirmed her worst fears. They weren't just covering their tracks. They were planning to silence anyone who might expose them. Linda was in immediate danger, and Sarah was trapped in a room with the people who meant to harm her. Time seemed to stretch as she waited, her muscles cramping from holding still. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, Brooks and his men left with the first load of boxes, promising to return for more. Sarah waited until their footsteps faded before emerging from her hiding spot. Her phone now held irrefutable evidence of both the fraud and the cover-up, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. They would claim the videos were doctored, that she was trying to extort them. She needed something more concrete. As she prepared to leave, a familiar name on a nearby cabinet caught her eye. Janet Anderson, personnel file. Unable to resist, Sarah quickly photographed its contents, revealing the elaborate scheme they'd used to frame her former colleague. The sound of returning footsteps spurred her into action. She slipped out of the archive room and back to her cleaning cart, heart pounding. As she pushed it toward the elevator, Brooks and his men passed by with more empty boxes, not even glancing at the cleaning lady doing her rounds. Back in the safety of the service elevator, Sarah's hands shook as she sent messages to both Linda and Marcus. Emergency meeting. Usual place. Dawn. She had just become a witness to conspiracy and fraud on a massive scale, and her window of opportunity to act was closing fast. As she finished her shift and headed home in the pre-dawn darkness, Sarah felt the weight of her discoveries pressing down on her. She had crossed a line tonight, moving from observer to active participant in a dangerous game. There would be no going back now. Manny's diner was nearly empty when Sarah arrived, the gray light of dawn barely touching the windows. Linda was already there, her normally immaculate appearance disheveled, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. Marcus arrived moments later, looking grim. "They're shredding everything," Sarah began without preamble, her voice low but urgent. She played the video she'd captured, watching Linda's face grow increasingly pale as Thompson's and Brooks' voices filled their quiet corner. "Oh God," Linda whispered, pushing her coffee away. "They're going to do to me what they did to Janet." "Not if we move first," Sarah insisted. pulling out her phone to show them the photos of Janet's personnel file. "Look at this. Emails, bank statements, all of it fabricated. They even had someone forge her signature on transfer documents." Marcus leaned back, running a hand over his face. "This is bigger than we thought. They've got a whole system for silencing people. We need to go to the authorities," Linda said, reaching for her purse. Sarah caught her arm. "We can't." "Not yet." Sarah glanced around before continuing. "Thompson has friends in the DA's office, remember? We need to make this too big to bury." Their conversation was interrupted by Sarah's phone buzzing. A text from Isabella. "Mom, where are you?" Miguel's temperature is up. The weight of her double life suddenly felt crushing. Her son needed her, but so did countless other children who would suffer if Thompson wasn't stopped. "Go," Marcus said, understanding in his eyes. "We'll figure out our next move. Linda, you should stay at my place for a few days. My sister's out of town, and nobody knows about the apartment." Sarah hurried home to find Miguel on the couch, pale but smiling weakly. "I'm okay, Mom," he insisted as she pressed a hand to his forehead. "Just tired." As she called his doctor and arranged for Isabella to stay home from school with him, Sarah's mind raced through possible scenarios. She needed a plan that would protect both her family and her allies while exposing Thompson's crimes. Later that morning, as Miguel finally slept, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Thompson looking for missing files. Security sweep scheduled. Watch your back." The stakes were rising. Sarah knew that soon, her invisibility wouldn't be enough protection. She needed leverage, something so damaging that Thompson couldn't risk coming after them. Her chance came that evening when she returned to work. As she cleaned the conference room after a late board meeting, her keen ears caught fragments of conversation from the adjoining office. "The Foundation's annual gala is next week," Thompson was saying. "We need this cleaned up before then. The governor will be there, and those nosy reporters from the Herald." Sarah's heart quickened. The gala was Thompson's crowning event, where he showcased his charitable works to New York's elite. It would be the perfect moment to expose him, but also the riskiest. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sight of Brooks entering Thompson's office, carrying a laptop. "We've traced some unauthorized access to the archive room," he reported. Security footage shows Sarah's blood ran cold. She'd been careful, but had she been careful enough? The next few hours were a blur of tension as she maintained her routine while straining to hear any indication that they'd discovered her involvement. She noticed more security guards than usual, their eyes scanning the halls with new intensity. Near the end of her shift, she was cleaning near Thompson's office when his secretary returned to retrieve something from her desk. Sarah kept her head down, but her ears pricked up at the sound of paper rustling. "Mr. Thompson needs the guest list for the gala finalized tonight," the secretary muttered to herself, shuffling through files. "And the seating arrangements." After the secretary left, Sarah waited a few minutes before approaching the desk. There, in plain sight, lay a golden opportunity, the complete plan for the gala, including security arrangements and schedule. With trembling hands, she quickly photographed the documents. If they were going to act, the gala would be their best chance. But one wrong move would mean disaster, not just for her, but for Linda, Marcus, and most importantly, her children. As she rode the subway home that morning, Sarah's mind was racing. They needed a plan that would make the evidence public in a way that couldn't be covered up or denied. The gala would have press, politicians, and social media influencers all in one place. But how could they ensure the truth reached them all simultaneously? Her phone buzzed with a message from Linda. Brooks asking questions about archive room access. They know someone was there. The net was tightening. They would have to move fast, but they would also have to be smarter than ever. Sarah thought of Miguel, of his resilience through cancer treatment, of how he never gave up even when things seemed hopeless. As she walked up the stairs to her apartment, Sarah made a decision. They would use Thompson's own event, his monument to fake philanthropy, to expose his true nature. But first, she needed to ensure her children's safety. Whatever happened next, they couldn't be anywhere near the fallout. The weekend before the gala brought new complications. Sarah sat in a small living room, watching Isabella help Miguel with his exercises while her mind raced through contingency plans. She'd already arranged for her children to stay with her sister in Boston during the gala, but every other piece of their plan seemed to be unraveling. Her phone vibrated with an encrypted message from Linda. Security cameras mysteriously erased from archive room night in question. Brooks, suspicious, asking questions about cleaning schedules. Before Sarah could respond, another message appeared from Marcus. Thompson hired private security for gala. Ex-military. This just got harder. The weight of their undertaking pressed down on her shoulders. They weren't just going against Thompson anymore. They were challenging an entire system designed to protect people like him from people like her. A knock at the door made her jump. Through the peephole, she saw two men in suits, not Thompson's usual security. Her heart raced as she motioned for her children to go to their room. Martinez? The taller man held up a badge. I'm Detective Wilson. We're investigating some irregularities at Thompson Global. Mind if we ask you a few questions? Sarah's mind flashed to Janet. How quickly they'd manufactured evidence against her. Was this the beginning of her own frame-up? She opened the door just enough to speak through the chain. I'm sorry, but I'm watching my sick son. Could we do this another time? Her voice remained steady, years of practicing invisibility helping her maintain a calm facade. Of course. We'll be in touch. The detective handed her his card, his eyes scanning what he could see of her apartment. Just routine questions about cleaning staff access to secure areas. After they left, Sarah's hand shook as she texted Marcus and Linda. Police involved now. Thompson's moving faster than we thought. That night at work, the atmosphere was different. Security guards watched her more closely, and she noticed Brooks personally checking the executive floor cameras. Her usual invisibility felt paper thin. While cleaning Thompson's office, she overheard him on the phone. I don't care what it costs. Find out who accessed those files. Yes, everyone on the cleaning staff. Background checks, financials, everything. Sarah forced herself to maintain her regular pace, fighting the urge to run. As she emptied Thompson's trash, a crumpled paper caught her eye, a preliminary guest list for the gala. She smoothed it carefully, noting new names, several judges, the police commissioner, even the state attorney general. Quite a turnout expected. Thompson's voice made her freeze. She hadn't heard him return. Everyone who's anyone will be there. Yes, sir, Sarah murmured, keeping her eyes down as she'd done countless times before. Just emptying the trash. You've been here a long time, haven't you? His tone was casual, but something in it made her skin crawl. Reliable workers are hard to find. 12 years, sir. Sarah continued her task, praying he couldn't hear her heart pounding. 12 years. And 2 children, correct? One recently recovered from cancer. Benefited from our foundation's support, as I recall. The threat was clear beneath the considerate words. He knew about Miguel, about the foundation's help. He was reminding her what she had to lose. Yes, sir. We're very grateful. She pushed her cart toward the door, feeling his eyes on her back. Gratitude is important, Miss Martinez. So is loyalty. Once in the safety of the service elevator, Sarah leaned against the wall, trembling. Thompson was sending a message. He could hurt her family if she stepped out of line. Her phone buzzed with a message from Linda. Found something big. Offshore accounts linked to hospital board members. They're all in on it. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The corruption went beyond Thompson, beyond even Thompson Global. They were fighting an entire network of powerful people who profited from others' suffering. As her shift ended, Sarah made two crucial decisions. First, she needed to get her children to Boston immediately, not wait for the gala. Second, they needed help. Someone with the power to protect them and the platform to make the truth undeniable. She remembered a name from the guest list: Diana Reynolds, the investigative reporter who'd exposed several corporate scandals. Reynolds would be at the gala, and unlike the politicians and officials Thompson had bought, she had a reputation for incorruptibility. But reaching out to Reynolds was risky. If Thompson's people were watching the reporter, any contact could expose their entire operation. They needed a way to get the evidence to Reynolds during the gala itself, when Thompson would be too focused on his public performance to stop them. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Marcus. Security sweep found hidden camera in archive room. They're closing in. Time was running out. Thompson was systematically eliminating every advantage they had, using his power and connections to tighten the net around them. They would have only one chance to expose everything, and it would have to be perfect. As she walked home in the pre-dawn light, Sarah found herself thinking of Carlos again. He had always told her that the biggest mistakes people in power make is underestimating those they think are beneath them. Thompson saw her as just a cleaning lady, someone who could be threatened or bought off. That would be his fatal error. The following day's sun was setting as Sarah helped Miguel and Isabella pack for their vacation to Boston. Her sister Maria had agreed to take them immediately, understanding the urgency without asking too many questions. Years of raising children alone had taught Sarah to prepare for emergencies, but this felt different, more final somehow. "Mom, something's wrong, isn't it?" Isabella asked, her dark eyes sharing the same penetrating gaze Carlos once had. This isn't just about Miguel's health. Sarah paused in folding a sweater, weighing how much to tell her daughter. Isabella was 17, almost an adult, and sharper than most people realized. Just like her mother, she saw things others missed. Sometimes, Sarah began carefully, doing the right thing means taking risks. Your father taught me that. Before Isabella could respond, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Linda. Brooks accessed my computer, found encrypted files. Had to run. Safe at Marcus's sister's place. The subplots were multiplying, threads weaving together into an increasingly complex tapestry. Linda's discovery about the hospital board members had opened new avenues of investigation. Marcus had found connections between Thompson's private security and several suspicious accidents involving former employees who'd asked too many questions. A knock at the door made them all freeze. Sarah approached cautiously, relaxing only when she saw Maria's familiar face through the peephole. "Mia, what have you gotten yourself into?" Maria whispered as she hugged her sister. "Two men were asking questions about you in the neighborhood today." Sarah's heart clenched. "The less you know, the better. Just keep them safe." She pressed an envelope into Maria's hand. "If anything happens to me, this explains everything. Take it to Diana Reynolds at the Herald." As Sarah helped load her children's bags into Maria's car, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street. The same one she'd seen outside Thompson Global earlier. They were watching her now, not even trying to be subtle about it. "I love you both." She hugged Miguel and Isabella tightly. "Remember what Papi always said about standing up for what's right." After they drove away, Sarah returned to her empty apartment and pulled out her phone. A new message from Marcus showed a photo of Janet, their former colleague who'd been framed. She was working at a gas station in New Jersey, her once confident demeanor replaced by defeated exhaustion. Sarah's research into Janet's case had revealed a pattern. Thompson didn't just silence whistleblowers. He destroyed them systematically, taking away their reputations, careers, and dignity. The message was clear: cross him and you'll lose everything. But Janet's story had also revealed something else, a weakness in Thompson's armor. His meticulous schemes required cooperation from multiple parties, each one a potential weak link. And one of those links had just made contact. A text arrived from an unknown number. I helped frame Janet. Can't live with it anymore. Have proof. Meeting too risky. Check locker 247 at Grand Central tomorrow morning. Sarah showed the message to Marcus during their brief meeting in the parking garage where he'd started taking his breaks. Could be a trap, he warned. Glancing at the security cameras he'd carefully mapped. Thompson's people could be setting you up. Or it could be what we need, Sarah countered. Something concrete that even Thompson's connections can't dismiss. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from Linda. They're moving up the timetable for the gala, she reported. Thompson knows something's coming. He's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. The pieces were moving faster now, the carefully constructed plans requiring constant adjustment. Sarah had learned from years of cleaning up others' messes that no plan survives contact with reality unchanged. Later that night, as Sarah moved through her cleaning routine at Thompson Global, she noticed new faces among the security staff. Their bearing was military, their eyes constantly scanning. Thompson was fortifying his defenses. In the executive bathroom, she overheard Thompson on his phone. I want everything ready to implement after the gala. New contracts, board resignations, everything. Clean slate, a pause. And make sure our friends at the DA's office understand their role. The implications were clear. Thompson was preparing to sacrifice some of his allies to protect himself. The corrupt hospital board members, the compromised officials, even Brooks. They were all potentially disposable. This revelation added another layer to their challenge. It wasn't enough to expose Thompson. They needed to reveal the entire network before he could distance himself from it. Sarah's phone vibrated with another message from the mysterious whistleblower. Others want to talk. Too scared of Thompson. Need guarantee of protection. The subplot was expanding, becoming perhaps more important than their original plan. If they could get multiple insiders to turn against Thompson simultaneously, his careful house of cards might collapse under its own weight. As her shift ended, Sarah stood at the window of the floor she'd just finished cleaning, looking out at the city she'd called home since childhood. Somewhere out there, her children were safe with Maria. Linda was hiding, protected by Marcus's family network. And tomorrow, she would either find the key to bringing down Thompson's empire or walk into a trap that would destroy everything she'd fought for. Grand Central Terminal hummed with early morning activity as Sarah approached locker 247, her heart pounding beneath her worn jacket. She'd arrived an hour early, watching from behind a newspaper for any sign of surveillance. The mysterious whistleblower's message had come with detailed instructions. Come alone, no phones, no cameras. The locker key had been left exactly where promised, taped beneath a specific seat in the waiting area. As Sarah inserted it into the lock, she felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her, real or imagined. Inside, she found a single USB drive and a handwritten note. Password is Janet's daughter's birthday. Share it only with Reynolds. Before she could process this, her burner phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus. Emergency. Thompson knows. Linda's gone. The world tilted on its axis. Sarah rushed to the nearest restroom, fighting down panic as she called Marcus. They took her right from my sister's apartment. Marcus's voice was tight with fear. Professional job. No witnesses. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. Linda knew everything, every document, every connection, every plan for the gala. If Thompson's people made her talk. Her phone buzzed again. Meeting in 30 minutes. Your office. J.T. Thompson was making his move, confident enough now to confront her directly. The carefully constructed plan was collapsing, and Linda's life hung in the balance. When Sarah entered Thompson's office exactly 30 minutes later, she found him standing at his window, his reflection in the glass showing the smallest of smiles. Miss Martinez, he turned, gesturing to a chair. Please, Sit. I believe we have some matters to discuss." Sarah remained standing, her fingers clutching the strap of her bag where the USB drive lay hidden. "Where's Linda Chan?" "Ah, straight to business. I've always appreciated that about you." Thompson sat behind his desk. "Miss Chun is reflecting on her choices. As you should be." He slid a folder across his desk. Inside were photos. Sarah in the archive room, meeting with Marcus, her children boarding Maria's car. "You've been busy." Thompson's voice hardened. "But then, so have I. Did you really think you could challenge someone like me? A cleaning lady?" The contempt in his voice crystallized something in Sarah's mind. This was the moment. The point where everything would either fall apart or transform into something unexpected. "You're right," Sarah said quietly. "I am just a cleaning lady. That's why I've been able to watch, listen, and record everything for 12 years without anyone noticing." She reached into her bag, but instead of the USB drive, she withdrew her phone and pressed play. Thompson's own voice filled the room. "Clean house. Get rid of them. Like we handled Janet." The color drained from Thompson's face as the recording continued, detailing plans for bribes, threats, and worse. "That's just from last week." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I have 12 years of recordings. Every conversation you thought no one was hearing. Every meeting you thought was private. All backed up in places you'll never find them. What do you want?" Thompson's voice was barely controlled. "Release Linda. Now. Then confess everything at the gala tomorrow night." Thompson's laugh was sharp. "Or what? You'll release the recordings? Against my lawyers, my connections, my resources?" "No." Sarah's voice remained calm. "I'll release everything to everyone simultaneously. Media, FBI, SEC, every employee at Thomson Global, every charity you've stolen from. All it takes is one text message." She showed him her phone screen, displaying a single word. "Ready?" The message had hundreds of recipients. "You're bluffing," but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Consider what you know about me," Sarah continued. "I cleaned your office every night for 12 years without you knowing my name. I raised 2 children alone while working nights. I watched my son fight cancer while you stole money meant to help him. Do I seem like someone who bluffs?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of shifting power dynamics. "If Linda isn't released, unharmed, within the hour, I press send. If anything happens to my family, I press send. If you try to run or hide instead of confessing at the gala, I press send. Those are the terms." Thompson's mask of superiority cracked, revealing the desperation beneath. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. There are people involved." "Powerful people?" "No," Sarah cut him off. "You never understood what you were dealing with. You saw a cleaning lady and assumed she was powerless. That was your mistake." Her phone buzzed, a message from Marcus. "Black SUV leaving underground garage. Heading east. Tick-tock, Mr. Thompson." Sarah moved toward the door. 1 hour. As she walked out of his office, Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. She'd just gone all in on a desperate gamble, and the next hour would determine whether she'd won everything or lost it all. The next 58 minutes were the longest of Sarah's life. She sat in Marcus's maintenance office, watching the security feeds he'd secretly accessed, while her phone displayed the countdown. Every passing minute felt like a year, weighted with the knowledge that Linda's life hung in the balance. "You actually threatened Thompson," Marcus said for the 3rd time, still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. "In his own office." "Had to raise the stakes," Sarah replied, her eyes fixed on the screen showing the parking garage entrance. "Make him believe he had more to lose than we do." Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. The message contained only an address in Queens and 2 words: "She's there." Sarah's hand shook as she forwarded the address to Marcus, who immediately began pulling up traffic camera feeds along the fastest route. They watched as the black SUV they'd been tracking turned down the indicated street. "I'm going," Sarah stood, but Marcus caught her arm. "Wait," he pointed to another screen. Brooks was moving through the building, gathering security personnel. "They're mobilizing. This could be a trap." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed again. A photo from Linda. She was bruised but alive, holding today's newspaper. Then another message. "Safe, with Diana Reynolds." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Linda had managed to make contact with the Herald reporter they'd been trying to reach. The game had changed yet again. "Look," Marcus pointed to the executive floor feed. Thompson was having what appeared to be a heated argument with Brooks and several board members. Their careful world was unraveling. Sarah's phone rang. Diana Reynolds herself. "Ms. Martinez." The reporter's voice was crisp. "Linda Chun has shared some remarkable information with me. I understand you have more." "The gala," Sarah replied. "Tomorrow night. Everything comes out then. They'll try to stop you. Count on it. That's why I need your help." Over the next hour, they refined their plan. Reynolds would ensure that key media outlets and law enforcement agencies had representatives at the gala. Linda would secure the digital evidence while she recovered at a safe location. But Thompson wasn't sitting idle. Through the security feeds, they watched as a parade of lawyers and private security consultants moved through the executive floor. Thompson was mobilizing his own forces, calling in every favor and connection he had. "Sarah Martinez?" A voice behind them made them jump. A young security guard stood in the doorway. "Mar, Thompson wants to see you again." Marcus started to protest, but Sarah squeezed his arm. "It's okay. He's not done negotiating." This time, Thompson's office felt different. The usual artifacts of power, the expensive art, the pristine desk, the commanding view, seemed somehow diminished. "You've made your point," Thompson said without preamble. "Name your price." Sarah studied the man who had terrorized so many people, who had stolen from sick children, who had thought himself untouchable. He looked smaller somehow. "You don't have enough money. Everyone has a price," he insisted. "A college fund for your children. A house. Security for life. You still don't understand." Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. "This isn't about money. It's about all the families you've hurt, all the people you've destroyed, all the children who suffered because you stole their chance at treatment." Thompson's facade cracked further. "I can make things very difficult for you. Your son's medical records, your immigration status, your sister's business licenses. More threats?" Sarah shook her head. "Every threat you make, every person you try to hurt, just proves why you need to be stopped." She turned to leave, but Thompson's next words froze her in place. Carlos wasn't an accident. Sarah's world tilted on its axis. Her husband's death in a construction accident 5 years ago. The incident that had left her a single mother. He was asking questions about safety violations. Violations that would have cost us millions to fix. Thompson's voice was clinical, detached. Sometimes examples need to be made. The rage that filled Sarah was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Her hands shook as she turned back to face him. "Thank you," she said softly. Thompson blinked, thrown off balance. "For what?" "For confirming that there's no deal to be made. For moving any doubt about what needs to be done." She pulled out her phone and pressed send on a pre-written message. That confession was just recorded and sent to Diana Reynolds. The color drained from Thompson's face as he realized his tactical error. In trying to intimidate her, he'd given her an even more powerful weapon. As Sarah walked out of his office for the second time that day, she felt a strange sense of calm. Tomorrow's gala would be more than an exposure of financial crimes. It would be a reckoning. The night of the gala arrived with an electric tension in the air. Sarah adjusted her borrowed catering uniform in the service entrance mirror. her heart pounding beneath the crisp white shirt. Diana Reynolds had arranged her placement on the serving staff, hiding in plain sight one last time. Through her earpiece, Marcus's voice provided updates from his security station. Thompson's arrived with private security. They're sweeping the entire building. A pause. The governor's here. State Attorney General, too. Sarah moved through the glittering crowd with practiced invisibility, carrying a tray of champagne flutes. The grand ballroom of Thomson Global sparkled with wealth and power. Politicians, business leaders, and social elites all gathered to celebrate their own supposed generosity. Positions confirmed. Linda's voice came through the earpiece. She was monitoring everything from Reynolds' secure office. Media teams in place. FBI agents scattered throughout the crowd. Thompson stood at the center of it all, playing the role of benevolent philanthropist to perfection. But Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes constantly scanned the room. Brooks is moving, Marcus warned. Headed your way with security. Sarah smoothly changed direction, years of avoiding notice serving her well. She caught glimpses of other players in their drama. The corrupt hospital board members, the officials who'd helped cover everything up, all dressed in their finest and celebrating their own charity. Thompson approached the podium as the time for speeches drew near. Sarah moved closer, careful to maintain her servant's invisibility. Ladies and gentlemen, Thompson began, his voice carrying easily through the room. Tonight we celebrate the power of giving. Now, Linda's voice crackled in Sarah's ear. Sarah reached for her phone, but before she could act, security guards began moving through the crowd with purpose. Bomb threat, they announced, starting to herd people toward the exits. Everyone must evacuate immediately. Thompson's last-minute contingency plan. Clear the room before the truth could come out. Sarah saw Brooks smirking near the stage, thinking they'd outmaneuvered her. But Sarah had spent 12 years studying this building, its rhythms, its secrets. While Thompson's security was focusing on the main exits, she was already moving toward the service corridor. Marcus, now, she whispered. The lights went out. In the moment of darkness and confusion, Sarah moved. When the emergency lights came on seconds later, she was standing at the podium. Thompson's security was blocked by the panicking crowd, and Thompson himself stood frozen, staring at her. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah's voice carried through the sound system that Linda had helpfully hacked. My name is Sarah Martinez. I'm a cleaning lady here at Thomson Global, and I have a story to tell you. Security was pushing through the crowd, but they were too late. The live stream had already begun, broadcasting to every major news outlet, social media platform, and law enforcement agency simultaneously. For 12 years, I watched Mr. Thompson and his associates steal money meant for sick children. Sarah's voice grew stronger. I watched them destroy anyone who tried to speak up. They even killed my husband when he discovered their safety violations. The crowd had gone completely still. Phones were raised, recording everything. Thompson's security reached the stage just as Sarah pressed one final button on her phone. The ballroom's massive screens came to life, displaying documents, recordings, and surveillance footage. Years of evidence, carefully gathered by the invisible woman who cleaned their offices every night. You can arrest me, Sarah continued as security grabbed her arms. But you can't stop the truth. Every person in this room has already received all the evidence. Every news outlet, every law enforcement agency, every employee of Thomson Global. It's over. Thompson lunged for the microphone. This woman is delusional. Security, remove her. Is that what you said about my husband, Mr. Thompson? Sarah's voice cut through his protests. Before you had him killed? The same way you tried to silence Linda Chun yesterday? The FBI agents in the crowd were moving now, but not toward Sarah. They converged on Thompson, Brooks, and the other executives. Diana Reynolds stepped forward from the crowd, her press credentials visible. We have your confession on tape, Mr. Thompson, your admission about Carlos Martinez's death, along with evidence of decades of fraud, corruption, and criminal conspiracy. The room erupted into chaos. Hospital board members tried to flee, only to find more FBI agents at the exits. Officials who had taken bribes found themselves facing investigators who had all the evidence of their corruption. As security released her arms, Sarah finally allowed herself to look around the room. The invisible cleaning lady had just brought down an empire of corruption, and she had done it by turning Thompson's greatest weapon, his contempt for those he considered beneath him, against him. Through her earpiece, she heard Linda's voice, thick with emotion. "We did it, Sarah. We really did it." 1 year later, Sarah Martinez sat in a different kind of meeting room, surrounded by photographs of smiling children, survivors of cancer, recipients of genuine charitable aid. The nameplate on her desk read, Director of Oversight, Thompson Memorial Children's Fund. The irony of the fund's name wasn't lost on her. After Thompson's arrest and conviction, the board of directors had been completely replaced, and the company's charitable foundation had been restructured as an independent entity. They'd kept the Thompson name as a permanent reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked. "Mom," Miguel's voice carried through the open door. He was interning at the fund for the summer, his own experience as a cancer survivor helping him connect with current patients. At 16, he'd grown into a thoughtful young man who understood exactly what his mother had fought for. "The new funding proposals are ready for review," he said, dropping a stack of files on her desk. "And Isabella called. She got the journalism scholarship at Columbia." Sarah smiled, thinking of her daughter following in Diana Reynolds' footsteps. The reporter had become a mentor to Isabella, showing her how to use truth as a weapon against corruption. Her phone buzzed with a message from Linda, who now headed the fund's financial compliance department. "Janet's back in town. Dinner tonight?" After Thompson's fall, Janet Anderson had been fully exonerated. She'd returned to finance, this time specializing in detecting corporate fraud. Her experience, like Sarah's, had become a tool for preventing others from suffering the same fate. Marcus knocked on her door, still wearing his maintenance uniform. He'd refused any other position, saying he could do more good keeping his eyes and ears open at ground level. "You're going to want to see this," he said, handing her the morning's newspaper. The headline read, "Thompson Global Corruption Case Leads to National Reform." The article detailed how their exposure of Thompson's crimes had sparked a widespread investigation into charitable fraud, leading to new regulations and oversight measures. Sarah's desk phone lit up. Diana Reynolds calling. The reporter had become a close friend, their shared commitment to exposing truth forging a strong bond. "Just got word," Diana said without preamble. Thompson's appeal was denied. "He's serving the full sentence." Sarah thanked her and hung up, taking a moment to let the news sink in. Thompson would spend the rest of his life in prison, along with Brooks and several other executives. The corrupt hospital board members had taken plea deals, providing evidence that led to even more arrests. The wall of her office held a simple frame containing a cleaning uniform, a reminder of where she'd come from and what she'd accomplished. Next to it hung a photograph of Carlos, his warm smile now a source of peace rather than pain. He would have been proud of what she'd done, of the example she'd set for their children. A group of young cancer patients passed by her office, heading to the fund's new recreation room. Their laughter echoed through the halls, the sound of hope that Thompson had tried to steal. Sarah opened her desk drawer and took out her old notepad, the one where she'd first started documenting Thompson's crimes. Its pages were filled with 12 years of careful observations, written in the margins between cleaning supply inventories. It would be going to the Smithsonian's exhibit on corporate whistleblowers next month. The day's last appointment arrived, a cleaning lady from another corporation, nervous but determined, clutching documentation of suspicious activities she'd observed. Sarah welcomed her with understanding, ready to help another invisible worker find her voice. As the sun set over Manhattan, Sarah stood at her office window, the same window where Thompson had once stood. Though the view felt different now, the city stretched out before her, full of other buildings, other corporations, other powerful people who thought themselves above the law. But things were changing. Thompson's case had shown that no one was untouchable, that truth could come from unexpected places, that the people others overlooked were often the ones who saw the most. Her phone buzzed with messages from the network she'd helped build out: other whistleblowers, advocacy groups, investigative reporters. They were all part of a larger movement now, working to ensure that what happened at Thomson Global would never happen again. As she gathered her things to head home, Sarah passed the building's cleaning staff starting their evening shift. They nodded to her with respect, but also with understanding. She was still one of them, even if she now had a different role. Outside, the city was coming alive with evening activity. Sarah thought about the year's journey, from isolation to community, from powerlessness to purpose, from invisibility to impact. Thompson had been right about one thing: everyone has a price. But he'd never understood that for some people, that price was paid in dedication to what's right, in courage to stand against corruption, in commitment to protecting others from harm. The setting sun caught the windows of Thomson Global, now renamed Hope Corporation, turning them to fire. Sarah smiled, remembering how Thompson had once laughed at her concerns. He never saw her coming. None of them did. That was the real lesson of everything that had happened. Change doesn't always come from the top. Sometimes it comes from the shadows, from the margins, from the people others don't think to watch. Sometimes it comes from a cleaning lady who refused to look away. If you enjoyed this story, we'd love for you to support us by leaving a like and subscribing to our Slices of Life channel. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Which city are you talking about? It's very rewarding for us to provide our followers with an enjoyable moment. We appreciate the unconditional support you show us in every story. Blessings!